Perfection. So hard to achieve, yet we expect it from almost everybody. But what's the one type of person we expect it the most from? Physicians. Face it, you're not going to put your life on the line if there's a surgery that only has a 99% success rate. It has to be 100%. But doctors are only humans. They make mistakes too. Brian Goldman talks about this in his TED Talk, Doctors Make Mistakes. Can we talk about it? I think we have to do something about a piece of culture of medicine that has to change. And I think it starts with one physician, and that's me. And maybe I've been around long enough to afford to give away some of my false prestige to be able to do that. Before I begin with the meat of my talk, let's begin with some baseball. We all love baseball, don't we? Baseball's full of amazing statistics. I'm going to focus on one statistic. It's called batting average. Say you have a batter who bats 300. This means the batter is batting 3 out of 10 times safely. Do you know what they call a batter who bats 300? Good. Real good. Maybe an all-star. Do you know what they call a batter who bats 400? Who, by the way, is hitting the ball 4 out of 10 times safely. Legendary, as in Ted Williams legendary. The last baseball great to hit over 400 during the regular season. Now let's take this back to my world of medicine, where I'm a bit more comfortable, or perhaps a bit less comfortable, after what I'm going to talk to you about today. Say you have appendicitis, and you go to a surgeon who's batting 400 on appendectomies. Somehow this isn't working, is it? Now say you live in a certain part of a certain remote place, and you have a loved one who has blockages in 2 coronary arteries. Your family doctor refers this loved one to a cardiologist who's batting 200 on angioplasties. But you know what? She's on the comeback trail, and this year she's batting 257. Somehow this isn't working. But I have a question for you. What do you think the ideal batting average for a cardiac surgeon, or a nurse practitioner, or a orthopedic surgeon, an OBGYN, a paramedic is supposed to be? 1,000. Now the truth of the matter is, nobody in all of medicine knows what the perfect batting average for a good physician, or a good physician, or a good surgeon, or a good paramedic is supposed to be. But what we do, though, is we send each and every one of them out into the world with the message, be perfect. Never, ever, ever make a mistake. But you worry about the details, about how that's going to happen. And that was a message I absorbed when I was in med school. In high school, I was an obsessive-compulsive student. One of my classmates said Brian Goldman was studying for a blood test. And so I did. And I memorized everything. In my anatomy class, I memorized the origins and insertions of every muscle, every branch of every artery that came off the aorta, differential diagnosis, obscure and common. And all the while, I was amassing more and more knowledge. And they did well. I graduated with honors, cum laude. And I came out of med school with the impression that if I knew everything, or as much as possible, as close to everything as possible, it would immunize me against making mistakes. And so it did, for a while, until I met Mrs. Drucker. I was a resident when Mrs. Drucker was brought into the emergency department at the hospital where I was working at. And at that time, I was assigned to the cardiology service on the cardiology rotation. And it was my job, when the emergency staff called for a cardiology consult, to see that patient and report back to my attending. I saw her. She was breathless. I listened to her. She was wheezy. I could hear crackly noises on both sides. This told me she was in congestive heart failure. And it wasn't a difficult diagnosis to make. I made it, and I set to work on treating her. And at about an hour or a half or two, she started to feel better. And I felt really good. And that's when I made my first mistake. I sent her home. Actually, I made 2 more mistakes. I sent her home without speaking to my attendant. My second mistake was much worse. In sending her home, I disregarded a little voice inside me saying, "Goldman, not a good idea. Don't do this." In fact, so lacking in confidence was I that I asked the nurse who was looking after Mrs. Drucker, "Do you think it's okay if she goes home?" "Yeah, I think she'll do fine," the nurse said very matter-of-factly. So I signed the discharge papers. And all that day, all that afternoon, I had this gnawing feeling inside me. But I carried on with my work. And at the end of the day, when I packed up to go home, I did something that I usually don't do. I walked through the emergency department on my way home. And it was there, another nurse. Not the nurse who was looking after Mrs. Drucker, another nurse, who said 3 words to me that are the 3 words that most ER physicians dread. Do you remember? "Do you remember that patient you sent home?" she asked, very matter-of-factly. "Well, she's back," in just that tone of voice. Well, she was back, all right. She was back near death. About an hour after I sent her home, she collapsed and had to be brought back to the emergency department by the paramedics, where she had a blood pressure of 50, which is in severe shock. She was breathless and she was blue. And the emergency staff pulled out all the stops. They gave her medication to raise her blood pressure. They put her on a ventilator. And I was shocked and shaken to the core. Because after they stabilized her, they sent her to the ICU, where I hoped against hope that she would recover. But after a day, it was clear she was never going to wake up. She had irreversible brain damage. And the family gathered. And at about the 8 or 9 day mark, they let her go. Mrs. Drucker, a wife, a mother, and a grandma. They say you never forget the names of those who die. And for the first time, I experienced the unhealthy shame that exists in our culture of medicine. You know the healthy kind? Where you betray a secret to a friend, and then you get busted, and then you confess, and you have all the terrible types of discussions, but at the end of it all, that sick feeling guides you. The unhealthy shame I was feeling was the one that makes you so sick inside. It's the one that says not that what you did was bad, but that you are bad. And it was what I was feeling. And it wasn't because of my attendant. He was a doll. I'm quite sure he smoothed things over and made sure I didn't get sued. And I kept asking myself these questions. Why did I send her home? Why did I ask my attendant? And at my worst moments, why did I make such a stupid mistake? Why did I go into medicine? When was the last time you heard somebody talk about failure after failure after failure? Oh yeah, you go to that cocktail party and you hear about some physician talk about another physician's failures. But you're not going to see somebody talk about their own. That's the system we have. It's a complete denial of mistakes. It's a system where there are 2 types of physicians. Those who make mistakes and those who don't. Those who can't handle sleep deprivation and those who can. Those who have lousy outcomes and those who have great ones. And we have this idea that if we take out all the error-prone health professionals from medicine, we'll be left with a safe system. But there are 2 errors with that. The first one is that errors happen every day in medicine, where 1 in 10 medications are either the wrong one or the wrong dosage, where hospital-acquired infections are getting more and more numerous. And here's the thing. In medicine, knowledge is doubling every 2 or 3 years. Given all that, mistakes are inevitable. So if you take out all the error-prone health professionals, as I was taught, and shove them out of medicine, there'll be nobody left. The redefined physician is human, knows she's human, accepts it, isn't proud of making mistakes, but strives to learn one thing so she can teach others. She's supportive when other people talk about their mistakes. She points out other people's mistakes, not in a gotcha way, but in a loving, supportive way. And the system is evolving to create backup so when other people make mistakes, they'll fix it and are rewarded for doing so. And especially people like me, who come clean about their mistakes, are rewarded also. My name is Brian Goldman. I am a redefined physician. I make mistakes. I'm sorry. And I still don't know what you think about me, but I can live with that. And I would like to conclude with 3 words of my own. I do remember. Thank you.